If a man tells you he loves you, but every time you speak your truth, he twists it into something ugly, your body learns to doubt itself. You start to feel as if love is supposed to hurt, as if love means questioning your own memory, your own feelings, your own reality. Somewhere inside, the little girl who once trusted her voice begins to fall silent. She trades certainty for survival, truth for attachment. And yet, the pull toward him feels intoxicating, almost sacred, as though you were bound by something deeper than reason. That is the seduction of gaslighting. It masquerades as love, and the empath cannot tell the difference, because the wound of her childhood still confuses love with pain. Gaslighting thrives on an unconscious agreement. One person denies reality and the other accepts the burden of doubt. For the empath, doubt feels familiar. It mirrors the subtle betrayals of parents who dismissed her tears, who told her she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. So when the narcissist enters her life with his magnetic intensity and grand gestures, she feels both seen and erased at once. His charm whispers safety, but his silence screams control. He touches her deepest wound, the hunger to be validated, and then pulls away, leaving her starving again. This push and pull is not random. It is the architecture of the cycle. It is the way he binds her without chains. Carl Jung once said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The empath calls this cycle fate because it feels inevitable, like a cosmic bond she cannot break. But in truth, it is her shadow reenacting itself. The shadow whispers, "If you can heal him, you will heal yourself." So she stays, confusing the ache in her chest for the pulse of devotion. Every cruel word is reinterpreted as passion, every lie excused as fear, every manipulation softened into love. The empath does not see the trap because she is still trying to rescue the parent who first taught her to doubt her worth. Gaslighting is not just words, it is alchemy. It dissolves your confidence until you question whether you even exist apart from his approval. One moment he adores you, the next he withdraws cold and unreachable. He accuses you of things you never did, and when you defend yourself, he sighs, shaking his head, as if you were the one twisting reality. Your nervous system learns to anticipate his moods, to bend before the storm, to apologize just to make the silence end. Over time, you begin to crave his forgiveness like oxygen, mistaking the relief of reconciliation for the feeling of being loved. This is why gaslighting feels like love. It mimics the rhythm of trauma bonds, tension, rupture, and repair. But here is the hidden key. Love is not supposed to destabilize your reality. Real intimacy makes you more alive, not less certain. The reason gaslighting feels like love is because your unconscious has fused danger with desire. Your body carries the memory of needing affection from those who hurt you, so now, hurt itself feels like home. This is why the narcissist cycle feels electric. It is not chemistry, it is recognition. He mirrors back the wound you never healed, and you mistake the familiarity for destiny. Yet even within the cycle, there is a flicker of awareness. A woman feels it in the quiet moments when she is alone. She looks in the mirror and sees her own face blurred like a painting smudged by careless hands. She wonders when she stopped recognizing herself. This moment matters because it is the first sign of awakening. Jung wrote that the shadow must be faced, not destroyed. The empath must see that her silence is not love, it is self-abandonment. The cracked mirror she gazes into is not proof of her brokenness, but a symbol, an invitation to reclaim the reflection that belongs to her. And yet the question lingers. If the cycle is so destructive, why does leaving feel harder than staying? Why does the empath, who knows she is being manipulated, still feel the urge to cling to the very person who denies her reality? The answer lies not in logic, but in the unconscious contract both have signed. And until that contract is broken, the dance will continue. The bond between the empath and the narcissist is not built on shared joy but on shared wounds. The empath carries the shadow of abandonment. The narcissist carries the shadow of emptiness. When they meet, their shadows recognize one another. He projects his self-loathing onto her, making her question her worth, while she projects her longing for love onto him, believing that if she endures enough, she will finally be chosen. It is a dance of mirrors, but the reflections are distorted. Each is chasing wholeness in the other, yet both are trapped in fragments of themselves. The narcissist thrives on control, and gaslighting is his weapon of choice. But the deeper truth is that he fears exposure. To admit reality would mean to face the hall. Low core within him, the emptiness that no praise or conquest can ever fill. So he twists reality instead, keeping the empath unsteady, ensuring that she never has the ground beneath her feet to confront him fully. For the empath, this twisting feels strangely familiar, because her nervous system has been conditioned since childhood to doubt her own clarity. The moment she begins to sense truth, doubt arises, and she retreats into silence. This silence, which once protected her as a child, becomes the very cage that imprisons her as a woman. There is a strange intoxication in this cycle. The empath feels a heightened aliveness, not because of love, but because of survival. The body confuses adrenaline with passion, fear with devotion. Each accusation, each withdrawal becomes a test she must pass to prove her worth. And when he finally offers crumbs of affection, her entire being lights up with relief. This is the trauma bond, a loop where pain and pleasure are fused together so tightly that breaking free feels like losing oxygen. But beneath the intensity lies a haunting question. Is it love if it only thrives in confusion? Jung described projection as the way we meet ourselves in others. In the empath-narcissist bond, projection is everything. The narcissist projects his shame and rage onto her, convincing her that she is the unstable one. The empath, in turn, projects her capacity for love onto him, believing that beneath his cruelty there must be a wounded boy who simply needs more understanding. In truth, she is not loving him. She is trying to love the rejected parts of herself through him. He becomes the canvas upon which she paints her longing for acceptance. And so, the cycle tightens, each feeding the other's shadow without ever touching the light. But even shadows cannot remain hidden forever. The empath begins to notice cracks in the illusion. She realizes that no matter how perfectly she bends, he always finds another fault. No matter how deeply she forgives, he always invents another sin. And with each cycle, the cost grows heavier. The loss of self-respect, the erosion of joy, the fading of her voice. She looks again into the cracked mirror and wonders if the reflection she sees is even hers anymore. That moment is not despair, it is prophecy. The mirror cracks not to destroy her, but to reveal that her reflection is waiting on the other side, untouched by his distortions. The awakening often begins quietly. Perhaps she hears herself laugh with friends and realizes how foreign the sound feels. Perhaps she wakes one morning and feels no rush of anxiety, and the stillness startles her more than the chaos ever did. In these moments, she glimpses a truth she has long forgotten. Love is not supposed to erase her, but to bring her into sharper focus. The high priestess within her stirs, the archetype of inner knowing, the one who does not argue or beg for recognition but simply sees. And once she begins to see, the gaslight loses its power. For light, even false light, cannot blind eyes that have learned to trust the dark. Yet the question remains, if clarity is awakening, why does the empath still hesitate to walk away? Why does the fear of absence feel more unbearable than the certainty of pain? This is where the unconscious reveals its deepest knot, the secret tether that binds her not to the man, but to the wound itself. The secret tether is not love but memory. Deep in the body lies the echo of childhood, when affection was conditional, when silence bought safety, when love was earned by self-erasure. The empath's nervous system learned that to be abandoned was unbearable, so it created a survival pact: tolerate distortion, accept blame, shrink if necessary, anything but lose the bond. This pact remains alive in adulthood, disguised as devotion. So when the narcissist destabilizes her reality, the empath does not leave. She doubles down. She clings not because of who he is, but because her body believes survival still depends on staying attached to the one who hurts her. The narcissist, sensing this, deepens the cycle. Each act of gaslighting is a test, a way to ensure her loyalty. He pushes her further from herself because the more she doubts, the more power he holds. And yet this power is fragile. Beneath his mask lies a hollow man, terrified that if she truly saw him, she would walk away. His cruelty is not strength but defense, a way to prevent the unbearable shame of exposure. He needs her belief more than she needs his love. Without someone to absorb his projections, his emptiness would swallow him whole. This is why their bond feels unbreakable. It is not built on shared love but on mutual shadow. She hides from abandonment, he hides from shame. She sacrifices her truth, he sacrifices his humanity. Together, they form a perfect lock and key, but the lock is rusted and the key was never meant to fit. Jung would call this enmeshment a failure of individuation, instead of two whole selves meeting. They become fragments trying to complete one another. But fragments cannot create wholeness. They can only create dependency. And yet, there comes a moment when the empath's soul rebels. She feels the quiet rage of the high priestess within, the archetype who does not fight with swords but with silence, not the silence of defeat but the silence of sovereignty. This silence is not the child's silence of survival, but the woman's silence of refusal. It is the silence that says, "I see through the illusion." It is the silence that breaks the cycle because it no longer feeds the narcissist's need for reaction. In that moment, the gaslight flickers and fades, for its power was never real. It lived only in her willingness to doubt herself. Still, breaking free is not a single act but a process of reclamation. The empath must learn to sit with the terror of absence, to hold the trembling child within and whisper, "You are safe even without them." She must grieve not only the man she thought she loved, but the parts of herself she abandoned in order to love him. This grief is sacred. It is the fire that burns away illusion. Out of it rises the forgotten truth. Love is not confusion. Love is clarity. Love is not erasure. Love is recognition. The cracked mirror returns here, not as a symbol of her brokenness, but of her rebirth. When she gazes again, she no longer sees a blurred reflection. She sees a woman with eyes steady and clear, a woman who knows that she was never unworthy, only taught to forget. The mirror becomes whole not by repairing the cracks, but by accepting them as part of the design. She does not need to erase the past to reclaim herself. She needs to honor it, to see how the wound carved the space for her strength to emerge. And yet, one question lingers like a shadow on the edge of the light. If the empath can awaken, if she can reclaim her voice, what happens to the bond itself? Does the narcissist change when the mirror no longer reflects his illusion? Or does the cycle collapse into dust once the silence becomes sovereign? When the empath awakens, the cycle begins to unravel, not because the narcissist transforms, but because his game loses its stage. Gaslighting can only survive where there is an audience willing to question her own mind. Once she refuses to carry his projections, once she names his distortions for what they are, the spell fractures. He may rage, accuse, or plead, but none of it lands in the same way. His words no longer take root because her soil is no longer fertile for lies. This shift terrifies him, for without her belief, he is forced to face his own emptiness, the hollow echo he has spent a lifetime outrunning. But for her, this awakening is not an instant liberation. It is more like standing at the edge of a cliff, heart pounding, torn between the fear of falling and the longing to fly. She feels the pull of the old tether, the comfort of familiar pain, the temptation to return just one more time for reassurance. Yet every time she looks into the cracked mirror, she remembers. Returning will only blur her reflection again. The high priestess within whispers that sovereignty is not given, it is claimed. And claiming it means enduring the silence of absence, the trembling void where his voice once echoed. In that void, the empath learns the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of abandonment, but solitude is the sanctuary of self. At first, the silence feels unbearable, but slowly it begins to feel holy. She notices the sound of her own laughter returning, not as an echo from someone else's approval, but as a music that arises from within. She feels her body relax without the constant vigilance of anticipating his moods. This is the slow rebirth, the quiet return of trust in her own perception. For the first time in years, she realizes that her inner compass was never broken, it was only ignored. And still, the narcissist may circle back. He may return with apologies, with declarations, with promises of change. He may try to remind her of the intensity they once shared, the fire that burned so brightly in the beginning. But now her eyes are different. She sees the fire not as passion but as hunger, not as love but as need. She knows the difference between devotion and dependency, between recognition and erasure. And so, his words no longer intoxicate. They sound hollow, like an echo from a dream she no longer believes in. Here lies the paradox of freedom. Once she stops chasing his approval, she discovers she never needed it. The mirror reflects her again, steady and unbroken. She realizes that the love she sought to extract from him was always the love she had to give herself. This realization is not a grand epiphany shouted from the rooftops, but a quiet, steady knowing that settles into her bones. It is the kind of knowing that changes the way she walks, the way she speaks, the way she chooses. And yet the final question remains, the one that turns survival into transformation. Once the empath sees through the illusion, how does she ensure she never returns to the same cycle again? What inner vow must be made so that the shadow does not lead her back into the arms of another who would gaslight her soul into silence? The vow begins in the silence of her own heart. It is not a declaration made to the world, but a quiet promise whispered into the marrow of her being. Never again will I abandon myself for love. This vow is the axis around which her transformation turns. It does not mean she will never feel longing again, nor that shadows will never return, but it means that longing will no longer blind her, and shadows will no longer lead her into captivity. The empath becomes the guardian of her own perception, the keeper of her own truth. Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming whole, of uniting the fragmented parts of the self into a single, sovereign being. For the empath, this means welcoming the child who was silenced, the woman who was doubted, the shadow who confused pain with passion. Instead of burying them, she brings them to the table of her soul. She listens to their stories and tells them they are safe now. In this act, she breaks the unconscious contract that once bound her to the narcissist. No longer does she need an external figure to mirror her worth, because she has become her own mirror, one that does not crack under distortion. The narcissist in this new landscape becomes irrelevant. Whether he rages, pleads, or disappears, it no longer defines her path. His presence or absence no longer dictates her sense of self. He fades into the background like a shadow cast by a dying flame. What remains is her, clear-eyed, steady, and unafraid of the dark. She does not need to seek revenge or closure from him, because closure was never his to give. It was always hidden in the reflection she reclaimed from the cracked mirror. There is a beauty in this return, a wonder that feels almost mythic. The high priestess archetype now fully awakens within her. She embodies the woman who knows without needing proof, who sees without needing to explain, who waits in silence not because she is powerless, but because her power is rooted in stillness. She is no longer the empath who absorbs every wound, nor the victim who endures distortion. She has become the oracle of her own life, one who chooses rather than chases, one who listens to the quiet voice within and obeys it without fear. From this place, love takes on an entirely new form. No longer is it fused with confusion, no longer is it measured by sacrifice. Love becomes recognition without distortion, intimacy without erasure, connection without control. She no longer seeks fire to burn her alive, she seeks warmth to sustain her. She no longer mistakes the adrenaline of survival for the pulse of passion. She has learned the profound truth. Real love is steady, not volatile, and clarity is its greatest sign. And so, the cycle ends not with dramatic confrontation but with quiet sovereignty. The empath walks away not because she hates him, but because she loves herself more. She understands now that the cracked mirror was never a symbol of her brokenness, but a prophecy that one day she would look upon her own reflection and see wholeness again. That day has come. She does not chase, she does not beg, she does not explain. She simply chooses herself, and in doing so, she chooses life. This is the final question left to you. When the moment comes to stand before your own cracked mirror, will you have the courage to keep looking until the reflection you see is your own?